Soups, here it is.
The 9 Years Podcast.
Alright everybody, and welcome to episode 80 of the 9 Years Podcast. Yes, you heard that correctly. Episode 80, episode 80, with myself, Nick Draper, and my co-host, Stuart Deakins. Stu, the number 80 reminds me of 1980, and a very, very famous FA Cup final, which took place 14 years before I was born, of course. But the West Ham-Arsenal final, in which I believe Trevor Brooking scored the winning goal, with a header from an odd angle or something like that. I can't exactly remember. Did you happen to know that Trevor Brooking did indeed used to play for West Ham?
Yes, he did.
I pretty much know him for that cup final, and that's about it. But there you go. Any other particularly memorable FA Cup finals you can remember from yesteryear, excluding one in '88, of course?
Well, I remember the 86 one when Liverpool won a double. It's really weird, isn't it? You talk about FA Cup final, because obviously many years ago, when the FA Cup final was was the biggest game of the season. They used to do the build up, didn't they? Do you remember? And it's really weird. I can always remember certain goals.
I'm too young.
You're too young, no,
yeah,
whatever.
Anyway,
but in '86, I remember, because I think if I remember properly, it was the third goal that Ian Rush scored, and I always remember it because he knocked it across the keeper and it hit a camera that was in the back of the goal, and the camera went flying. And I just remember that vividly as being one of the memories of the FA Cup. But yeah, the 86, 87, they're all good finals when the FA Cup meant something to people.
Yeah, I think I came a little bit late, because obviously being born in '94, my first FA Cup final was about 2001 that I remember. Was that the Michael Owen final? Of course, I jest. The first cup final I can remember I remember watching at the time, of course, was the Arsenal-Sheffield Wednesday, which went to a replay. Midweek replay at Wembley.
Yes.
I think. Who was it? Was it Andy Linnigan? Or was it Steve Bold, one or the other?
It was Andy Linnigan, I think.
Broke his arm?
Yes, when he got dropped, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the replay, the old classic FA Cup replays, obviously I remember Manchester United versus Crystal Palace when the 3-3 game, and then didn't Palace turn up in that dreadful away kit for the replay?
Yeah, that sort of yellow and black Watford type colour. Ugh.
Horrible, wasn't it? Who'd wear an away kit?
Who would wear an away kit, indeed? What you also don't see with the FA Cup replays, of course, they've been scrapped, but also Andy Lingham falling off the shoulders of another player. You don't see that anymore. Players don't hoist other players up onto their shoulders anymore, do they? And parade them around the pitch for the lap of honour or anything. It just doesn't happen. Maybe we should bring that back.
Yeah, players are too busy. Do you know what? I've just been watching some football recently this week, and you know what?
Really?
Yes, amazingly.
Makes a change.
But do you know what really annoys you? You say about celebrations and that. What is it with this thing now that every player that talks to anybody on the pitch now has to put their hand over their mouth so that people can't see what they're talking about? Even Wimbledon players have started doing it recently. It bugs the hell out of me.
Try being a teacher in a primary school when your children have been told not to speak, and then all of a sudden that hand just goes up to the mouth as if you can't see the hand going up to the mouth, and you can't judge that they're speaking anyway. Anyway, let's move on. Top 7 lists.
Yes, I have got top 7 lists.
You do every week. Why do you sound so surprised every week? It's like, yes, actually, this week I do. You do every week.
So I look forward to them.
Okay, good.
And you know what? I always do something topical as well.
You do. Let's go.
So what I've done this week is I've been to a few parties this last couple of weekends, and I went to a party on Saturday, which was my auntie's 70th birthday, and I thought it was going to be like a tea and cake, because of course that's what old people do, but no, she had a party, and they had an 80s throwback, 80s always music, 70s 80s music, and also had a really good buffet. And obviously, as I'm getting married in the summer, we're now looking at buffets, so I've basically done my top 7 buffet foods.
Yeah, of course you did. Of course it's catering food related.
Yeah, of course. So in no particular order, my first is Indian selections: pork pie, cheese, onion and pineapple sticks, a selection of meats, a quiche, potato salad, and of course the old-time classic triangle sandwiches.
Where are the mini Yorkshire puddings?
No.
No?
No, I'm scared of them now, to be honest with you. I don't know what they are, I'm scared.
Okay. Thank you for that list.
That's okay, what's yours?
WrestleMania is coming, Stu, as we are well aware. So again, it's wrestling related.
Never.
The Rock very famously created, well, there's a television show for the wrestling called SmackDown.
Yes.
And that actually came from a word invented or a phrase invented by The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. And it became, after he said that, it came into regular usage, or whatever you want to say. So I've chosen my top 7 brand names that have become generic terms.
Cool.
Not really, is it? Let's be honest.
It's different.
True. So Hoover, Tannoy, Biro, the classics, Google, Jiffy Bag, Frisbee and Post-it. That was the best 30 seconds of audio in the history of podcasts. Not just this podcast, in the history of podcasting.
I don't feel embarrassed now that I've gone on to a food topic because that was quite naff for you.
Maybe naff was also a brand name that became a generic term. We'll investigate that and move very, very quickly on.
Boobs is what they want.
All right, lots of bits and pieces to talk about this week. Not just the football, of which there has been lots, but we're going to touch on the Kingsmeadow situation with the news of Kingstonian's impending ground share. Maybe look at a couple of other clubs that are having a little bit of trouble at the moment, Leyton Orient especially, Poli on Go and Tua Tango, all the usual alongside that. And we'll look ahead to the coming week's action as well. But right now, we've been joined by George Jones, as George attended, well, pretty much every single football match of any Wimbledon side has played over the past few days. So George is going to help us out discuss. Well, let's start with Tuesday night. I know we normally look back to the first game on Saturday, which was the big European tie with Warsaw at home. But I think the big news really, aside from the fact we've got 2 wins out of 2, was going to second place Scunthorpe, winning away from home for the first time since October in the league, anyway. Really impressive performance. Now, the key thing, I say the key thing, but obviously the most noteworthy thing going into the game, or just leading up to kickoff, was the changes that Neil made to the team. Tactically very, very astute, as it turned out, going for a bit of a 3-5-2 in the end. Why do you think, George, he went for that? What do you think the game plan was on the night with that formation? Was it to be more defensive and then play on the counter, or were there other reasons you think he went for that?
No, I think it was more attacking than defensive, if anything, because we went for that at half-time at Gillingham. We changed to this 3-5-2 system with Will Nightingale at right centre-back. And to be honest, we played really well in the second half of Gillingham when we were attacking and were going forward in that game. And it worked really well again on Tuesday. And I think while we're missing both Barry Fuller and Jonathan Meads, I think it's a realistic style that could suit us away from home. But I think, to be honest, at home, so again, I reckon we'll stick at 4 at the back. But on Saturday, we should play 3-5-2 again because we've been immense every second of the time we've played it.
Now, Stu, you might be the same as me. And when I saw, I should say, that starting lineup, and George, you were actually sending updates and mentioning it was a 3-5-2, which looked like Andy Barcham at left wing back. I was a little bit worried because surely Andy Barcham on the left hand side, then George Frankham as the other wing back.
Yeah, that was right.
A lot's asked of them in that sort of role, especially when we are defending. I know you've mentioned this in safe formation, but when we are defending and getting back into shape, are we expecting those two to be tucking in and creating a 5 there? And was Andy Barcham able to do that role, or do we still struggle a little bit? Defensively is not his strongest point.
No, but it actually suited him more defensively because we were effectively doubling up on the left-hand side. When they were attacking down their right, Darius Charles was almost moving into left back. So we were doubling up on their wingers, and then we were effectively switching to a back 4. So when they were attacking on their right, it was almost like Frankham moved to right back, Robinson and Nightingale as centre backs, Darius and Bartram both playing at left back. So it worked really well on last night, and it was incredibly defensive, and it worked amazingly. I've never seen. The Scunthorpe fans were saying that no team had countered their side so well. No team had sussed them out as well as we did in that first half.
Now, Stu, do you not think that sounds well? I might be putting words into your mouth here. It's my opinion, and although the statistics against teams in the top 6 this season might not bear this out, but Neil does seem very, very tactically astute when it comes to playing against the better sides, almost being the underdog, where you're not expected to go out and take the game to the opposition. He seemed to get this right quite a lot. Certainly a key feature of last season's promotion campaign was the fact he did that. And do you think that's where, perhaps at times, we've struggled this season? Because when it's come to the Coventries and the Charltons and teams like that, we haven't been able to break them down. We're not quite sure how to play these types of games. We've seen it in the FA Cup with Forest Green and Sutton United, of course.
Yeah, it's a fair argument, isn't it? It's interesting. I think if we're fair to Newadi, the Coventry game and the Sutton game, we didn't have loads. Well, we didn't have those. Will Nightingale coming back gives us a great option. It gives us another strong centre half. You've got to remember on Tuesday night as well, Dean Parrott come back into the squad. So we had two players coming back in, which then gives you an option of playing a different formation. I think with having three centre halves the size of Will, Paul Robinson and Darius, especially when you think about the fact that Will Nightingale and Darius are more than comfortable with the ball at their feet. They're big men, but Will Nightingale, for the size of him, actually is not. If you compare, I used to compare Ryan Sweeney and Will Nightingale together. Ryan Sweeney would just knock the ball long and into channels. Will Nightingale wants to take a touch and come out of it. So I think having ball playing centre halves actually works in that way. The 3-5-2, George is right. I was at Gillingham as well, and it changed the game because what it basically done was it squeezed. We played three quite high. Darius is able to get the ball down and play. George Frankham, Bartram. Yeah, Bartram isn't great defensively, but in that formation, George hit it now on the head. Darius does come over and sort of compensate that side. And if you look to the first half of Gillingham, George struggled playing as a right back, but actually looks better as a right wing back, which is a really weird thing. But maybe because his starting position is higher up the pitch.
I mean, that was the thing. He was playing more as a right midfielder with Nightingale at right back, so I think there was less pressure on him defensively because he knew if he made a mistake, Will was right there next to him, able to help him, and I think that made him relax. And George is certainly a better player when he seems more relaxed and there's not the pressure on him that some people thrive on.
Yeah, and I don't think he's enjoyed that right back position. I don't think he enjoys. I don't necessarily think he understands or is comfortable in that right back position because he's not played it for so long. But actually, where his starting position is so high in a 3-5-2, effectively he is playing a right midfielder, and you've got people like Dean Parrott and Reezy who would drop in and cover the gaps if we do get caught.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's worked so well. We've got every position has got so much cover in it. And it takes the pressure off Frankham and Bartram because they know there's people around them that will cover if they make a mistake.
Well, that's sort of the point I was just about to make as well. Have we not seen the benefit then of seeing players come back in after injuries and getting those more options? So Dean Parrott back in. Darius Charles has been meant to come back in. And then we've mentioned Will there for his first start in months after injury. Just shows us that maybe in that period where we're struggling, we were really low on numbers and low on options. We're really seeing the benefits of being able to have these tactical adjustments, should we say?
Yeah, do you know what? Go on, sorry, Josh, go on.
No, what I was going to say is basically that we have missed Dino and it stood out, and Will Nightingale coming in. Because with all respect to Chris Robertson, you couldn't see him playing that style of football that Will Nightingale's enabled us to play the 3-5-2. And I think especially when you think back to the Sheffield United game, when we were cut apart out wide, I think this 3-5-2 system that having Will Nightingale back allows us to do, I think we might have actually got a point at Sheffield United just because there would have been so much extra cover out wide. And I think we've really suffered without him.
The other areas we've got options at the moment as well is in those forward positions because we've seen Tom Elliott actually dropped out on Tuesday night. Do you think that's more with an eye to Saturday's game as well and trying to just rotate the strikers? Because normally you look at those front two and we just come to expect the way we play to have the target man up there. And if Tom Elliott's not been available, we've tried to have Tyrone Barnett fill in that space to, well, leave that one there. But do we change our style in that sense then, George? Do we not go for that play off the big man up front kind of thing? Are we trying to use our width a little bit more?
No, I think Tom will come straight back into the team on Saturday. It was just on Tuesday night, they had two very old, very big centre-halves, and the pitch was slightly waterlogged and they were quite rough centre-halves, so it wasn't an ideal game for Elliott because he wouldn't have been at his best. Dom and Lyle both had much better games because they were just getting in and around him, around the back, coming in as a false nine, and we were just all over him. It wasn't a game that Tom would have done particularly well in. I think he'll do a much better job on Saturday, and we know his injury history, and I think it's more to do with, same as it is with Bournemouth, resting him and making sure that when we get him playing, he's at 100%.
So we've looked at 2 wins from the last 2 games after a little bit of nervousness prior to that, with a bit of a long winless run and some poor results at home and some very poor performances as well. We cast our minds back to Warsaw on Saturday. Bit of an advantage because it's quite a long way to travel for them, really, if you think. Probably getting on a plane. Who knows what time they arrived into London. But when you look back on that now, Stu, especially knowing when we looked at Walsall's away record, and they're actually, they have actually scored fewer goals away from home than we have this season, which, considering our long spell of not scoring away from home, says something quite a lot. Was kind of an ideal game to have, wasn't it, for us? Suffering a little bit with confidence, albeit coming off the back of a decent performance at Gillingham, although you look at Gillingham now and think they're the ones that are going to free fall if anyone is. But then Walsall were good opponents to have, weren't they?
Yeah, their home. It's interesting, isn't it? Because their home form was very good. They've had some really good scouts along the way. But it's interesting what Neil Hardy was saying after the Walsall game.
Sorry to interrupt you, but you know what it's like in those conditions. You know, a lot of right-wing sort of racist fans over in Poland and create a bit of an intimidating atmosphere. So no wonder their home record. We've been there, and it's not pleasant, is it? Yeah,
and all have a Brummie accent as well. So there must have been an intake of Brummies over there at some point during the last 40 years.
Like south of Spain, lots of English, lots of Brits. Yeah,
the Marbella effect, isn't it? No, it's interesting because when Neil Hardy was saying that when they do play, and it's something that actually I spotted on the day, was that they play with a screening midfielder in front of their back four. So really, they basically come for the draw, don't they? And that's what it looked like, because you had Otzuma, who literally. It's very difficult to pick him up because one, he's only 5 foot nothing, and he picks up really good positions and then plays him and Jackson off him. But they really didn't attack us, Nick, did they? Really, it was a case of really, were we brave enough to go for the win, and could they pick us off on the counter? And in the end, once we got the first goal, they then went 2 up top, but by then we were comfortable and saw the game out, I would say, comfortably, apart from an absolute screamer on the last minute that touched the top of the crossbar.
Yeah, it would have been unfair on us if that gone in at an amazing strike, in fairness to him. But as I mentioned to you at the time, 70 minutes into the game, and then they decided that they wanted to actually score a goal? It's pretty poor form, I think, personally, and probably why they're not going to hit the heights they did last season, knowing that they had a high turnover of players in the summer. But anyway, enough about that. George, from where you were on Saturday, what do you think, or who do you think particularly impressed? Who was the key man behind that win on Saturday? I think Jake Reeves, if I remember correctly, won the sponsors man of the match, but there was a couple of very important players, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it could have, man of the match on Saturday could have gone to absolutely anyone. Everyone played so well. It was such a good team performance. And a lot of things went right for us on Saturday, but again, we had some dubious decisions against us. But I probably would have gone for Lyle Taylor for my man of the match, personally.
Are you moaning about a referee again, George?
Yes.
There's a common theme, George, in this last couple of weeks. Is there not, Nick?
There does seem to be a little bit of a blame game. I think you've been spending too much time with Lawrence Loan. That's probably what it is.
Yeah. But should I just point out that the referee we had on Monday for the under-23 game at Middlesbrough was the best we've had this season.
Cool. So we got a compliment then from George.
Wow. Wonders will never cease.
Yeah.
I do take your point about Lyle Taylor. I think right down the spine of the team, we were very, very strong. So Lyle up top, Jake Reeves definitely in the midfield, Darius Charles, for me, outstanding centre-half. We're talking about a team that perhaps didn't want to come and attack us, but partly because Darius was just totally dominating in the centre of defence.
Yeah, Darius was also, sorry George, just to say, Darius was awesome at Gillingham as well, and he personally was my man of the match at Gillingham. But one thing he really does, he just adds that calmness. You never see Darius struggle. He never seems like he's doing a last-ditch tackle, which sometimes Paul Robinson has been caught out of position, etc. and stuff like that. But since Darius has come back, hasn't been caught out of position once, and I think it just adds that calmness. I think all the time Darius is playing there, you have a belief that you've got a chance of a clean sheet, or you might only concede one, which we didn't have earlier on. And he reminds me of when he came to join us last season. He sort of come into the team again at the same sort of time of the season, and it's not a surprise now we're starting to build results because he has been immense at the back there.
Yeah, and if you look, our defensive record, especially since Darius has come back, has actually been the next. But I think one of the main things about that makes him so good is just because of the fact that when he takes a touch and then dribbles it out just 10 yards, it gives the rest of the team, people like Lyle, Tom and Don Polion, just to get forward, and it gives us something to aim at when we clear the ball, rather than people like Robinson and to a certain extent Fuller, who just clear the ball first time, then it comes straight back. But because Darius takes the extra touch, it just calms it down, and it gives us time to build rather than just clearing it and having to defend straight away again.
And is that also helpful then, I suppose, when we're looking at a 3-5-2? If you've got three midfielders in front, we're looking at Parrott, Sawes, Reeves on Tuesday night. Players that can pick up, can do the same job, basically. If Darius decides then just to offload to one of those three, they can all pick a pass and get us moving without, like we said earlier, looking to hit Tom up front.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the things that I don't think came across in the text updates I was doing on Tuesday was just how good those three that midfield was. It was so incredible, the ground they covered. I mean, they were making up ground in defence, helping the defence out, making ground going forward, and to be honest, we won that game because of our midfield on Tuesday. The amount of ground, they just couldn't break through. The defence didn't have much to do on Tuesday, just because of the amount of work the midfield was doing, and it was something that was quite brilliant, but something that didn't really stand out in a way. I know that sounds weird, but it was so incredible, sense, yeah. And it's been so normal and consistent over the last month or 2 months that it's... Tom Sawes has had criticism from some quarters, but I think he does a similar role to Ballman in the sense that he's everywhere so much that you don't notice him anymore.
Well, yeah, that was going to be my next question, actually. I was going to put it to you, Stu, actually. Tom Sawes is starting to settle in now, isn't he? A few games down, he's starting to understand and see what he can bring us in that position.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was very difficult for him to come in. He come in from a Bury team that had a bad season, hadn't they? Do you know what I mean? They were in the bottom 4, bottom 5. We smashed them a few times with 5 and stuff like that. And he come in, then his first game away from home is Sheffield United, which, crikey, was a baptism of fire. But he's gradually built his way in, and he's an interesting player in terms of the role he's doing. He's really giving Jake Reeves a license to go and do what he wants to do. He sort of sits there, he controls it, can do a Danny Ballman role. I think he's better than that in terms of, no disrespect to Danny Ballman, but I think he's better technically going forward. So I think gradually we're starting to see now that, and George said, Darius isn't scared of stepping into the midfield area, and then all of a sudden it opens it up rather than just going long into Tom Elliott, which I started to think we were becoming a little bit predictable, which I think is why Neil Ardie's changed it. We're sort of going into the second round of games now, or a good part of the second round of games. The team's already seen us; they know what we're going to do, and we're able to change it. And I think now we've got the options. That's what Neil's very good in terms of tactically. He's always had 3-5-2 up his locker. And one thing I was just going to say actually with Will Nightingale up his locker. Do you know that?
His locker.
Yeah, I know, in his locker. Do you know what I was going to say, by the way, as well? Actually, not to name drop, but I was speaking to Will Nightingale's dad on Saturday.
Not to name drop.
And he was just saying that what a great record Will's got this season in terms of games that he's played, first team and under 21s. And I was just looking, actually, so I'm not going to count Football League trophy games because they don't count.
They don't count.
Basically, but he's played 5 League One games this year, lost 1, and that was to Bradford, which was a late winner by Hanson, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But his first game, believe it or not, was the game that we dominated Peterborough away. So he was involved in a 1-0 away win at Peterborough, yeah. 3-2 home defeat. Then he was involved in a 5-1 League One, 5-1 home win against Bury, and then comes back for Gillingham and Scunthorpe. I don't think it's a major surprise, but I was looking through the under-21s as well, and out of 5 under-21 games, he's won 4 of them. So Will in a team does, and it can't all be luck, do you know what I mean? He's just picking them stats out, but he is a commanding influence. And he don't now look, before we used to think, can he go into League One? Can he handle that level? I would argue now he looks like he's a first teamer. He's no longer a youth product. He's a first teamer, and we just need to keep him fit.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to quite a few of the under-23 games, and I've seen him alongside Paul Calambi a few times. And Paul Calambi looks so much of a better player when he has Will Nightingale next to him. And I think it's Will Nightingale's got the calming influence that Darius has of the people around him, and that they feel more relaxed and reassured when they know they've got someone of the quality of Will Nightingale sitting next to him in defence. And I think it's not just him that is doing so well. I think the whole team is feeling it and the confidence that he brings.
And I think we are now looking at, not saying we're 100% safe yet, but I think we can pretty much say now that we should be absolutely fine. And what an ideal opportunity for the remaining games of this season to really bed Will into that starting lineup, as Stu says, hoping that he stays injury free, and then thinking next season he's an automatic starter. If we're looking at perhaps Paul Robinson moving on, or certainly beginning to wind down his career, it's vitally important that Will then steps up and steps into that role. So it's all good news for us at the moment. Just to finish off the discussion about the 2 first-team games then this week, let's do a few Twitter polls and word reports. 3 word reports. Man of the match for the Warsaw game, as we've mentioned, Darius Charles, clear winner with 41% of the vote. Thank you for everyone who voted in that. Jake Reeves and Lyle Teo, 28 and 25% respectively. James Shea just with 6%. I think that was more for the save at the end. But as we mentioned earlier, so many choices for our Man of the Match poll on Saturday. And then Tuesday night, with a little bit of time left still, it's going to be a touch and go. Will Nightingale and Dominic Polion are pretty much inseparable, 1% between them at the moment. So check that out on Twitter. If you look for the hashtag OneWallOdyssey, you'll find our Man of the Match poll for Scunthorpe. Tom Saws and Jake Reeves, 6%, 5% with a vote. Does suggest that Will, as we've mentioned, and Dom with his goal scoring are the candidates there. In terms of 3-word reports, I've got loads to get through. I'll try and maybe no more than 3 or 4 then for the previous week just gone. Let's go for the Warsaw game. And I think the key one probably comes from Mike Over again. Mike_overall. We needed that. We definitely did. Big, huge result in beating Warsaw on Saturday. And then quite a few from Scunthorpe in the week. Ed Hewison at Ed Hewison. Polion melts iron. Very, very nice. M. Sturgeboy at Dummy Out the Pram. 352. Self-explanatory. And then we've got a couple here. Below the top league. At Tier 2 Footy. I think a first appearance on our podcast for them. Don's Bend Iron. Very nice. And David at Chudley Cannons. Any given Tuesday. Very, very nice. Thank you very much to Chris Draper, whoever he is, for the 3-word reports this week. 2 in 2 was his report for Scunthorpe. I think that says it all. No more relegation fears, I don't think. Now, George, you've had a very, very busy week, aside from our first team action, haven't you? Where were you on Monday? What time did you have to leave? What time did you return? And how much sleep have you had, having then gone to Scunthorpe on Tuesday night?
Yeah, well, Monday the under-23s were away to Middlesbrough. It was initially meant to be at 7 p.m. at the Darlington Arena, but then it was moved to...
Sorry to interrupt you, is that still there?
Yeah, there's a local rugby club that play there in front of 100 people, so it's much like Darlington playing there still.
That's ridiculous. Okay, anyway. Yeah, all right, go on.
Yeah, but then it was moved a couple of weeks ago to a 1 p.m. kick-off. Then we got 24 hours notice that it had been moved to Bishop Auckland now. So I had to leave home at 5 in the...
Just, sorry to interrupt you again, but that's like in New Zealand or somewhere, isn't it?
It felt like it. At the time it took a local bus to get there, to be honest.
That's shocking, that is. Sorry, Gold.
Don't do buses. Anyway, go on.
But yeah, it was so 5 a.m. departure from the house, got to Bishop Auckland about an hour before kick-off. And to be honest, it was a good game. We dominated Middlesbrough. George Oakley was incredible, which was good to see because he's been slightly off pace for the last couple of weeks in under-23 matches. So we obviously had a couple of good chances, went a miss, but we created a load of chances, didn't take them, and we ended up losing 1-0. We had a trialist, Nick Tanzev, in goal, who was released by Brentford. It was, as far as I can tell, from New Zealand, so he must have felt at home in Bishop Auckland.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he had, but as far as I can tell, he's only played 6 senior games, and they were on loan at Lewis last season. But he looked okay. He's 20 years old. He didn't have... I don't think he actually had a save to make, to be honest, but his communication was good, and his command of the area was quite good for crosses. But we ended up losing 1-0 after a poor defensive mistake, which allowed one of their players to have a mazy run through. But yeah, so after that, another long bus ride back into Darlington. Ended up staying the night there just because it was cheaper than getting a train back. Then went down to Scunthorpe, which I'm more than glad I did the 2 games now after seeing that result on Tuesday.
Yeah, I'm going to say away from home, we had this long spell of not winning away from home, and then you look back on the season come the end of it and you'll look at the amount of away games that we've been fantastic and outstanding this season that are going to be remembered for a long time. Obviously, Stu, you were at... oh, never mind. But we had Charlton and Peterborough and Bury and now Scunthorpe. You were at Curzon Ashton, Stu, to be fair.
Which was the coldest place on earth, officially.
Yeah, that was really cold.
That was the breeze on that day, but it was all worth it in the end. But you've certainly put the miles in this week, George, for those. Well, certainly earned that Scunthorpe win because of that. What time did you return? Sorry,
I got home morning? About 2:30 Wednesday morning.
That's not too bad. And then what have you been doing since then?
Sleeping, trying to catch up. I had about 2 hours sleep on Monday evening.
What was it, Tim Lovejoy? Not that I like to really quote Tim Lovejoy on this show, but what was he used to say about students?
Tax dodgers.
Yeah, tax dodgers. Get up, have a shower, stop listening to the Levellers. Come on, George.
It doesn't help that my uni course is 2 days a week, so...
God, dear, eh? Just a life, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? But George, I have to say, quite mad, actually. Quite mad doing that. How far was Bishop Auckland on the bus then from Darlington?
It took about an hour on a bus service.
Cool. So I bet you went for some places that you've never even thought you'd go through places like that before.
Yeah, including one place called Blue Houses, which was distinctly red, which made very little sense. But we travelled quite well in North Fairness on Monday.
George, sorry, just have a think what's going on in those houses. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
How many other Wimbledon fans were... Because there was a few other Wimbledon fans, wasn't there, in Bishop Auckland for the game?
Yeah, the overall attendance was 50, and I counted about 12 Wimbledon fans. But a big shout out to Dave Chan, who travelled up there trying to get to the Bishop Auckland game, but ended up missing it. So, but yeah, he ended up getting to go to the Newcastle Tottenham under-18s match in the evening, which ended up being, I think it was 5-3 to Tottenham in the end.
So he fell on his feet in the end, but that's a hell of a journey or ordeal you've been through. So, well done, George. Outstanding. Thank you very much for all the updates on our Twitter page as well. For the games.
Yeah.
Did a sterling job. And also you've got to see some of the most romantic and beautiful parts of this great country of ours, such as Darlington.
Yeah.
Anyway, nice one, George. I suppose we should let you go and try and get some more sleep, I imagine.
That'd be very much appreciated.
Cool, but nice one, thank you very much. And more updates on Saturday from Bolton?
Yes. There'll be even more updates from Bolton.
Superb. Thank you very much, George.
Yep, thank you.
Two-word tango. David Peters on Twitter again contacted us after last week's successful version of the game. Premier League or ex-Premier League teams that are no longer in the Premier League. This week he suggested, Stu, teams that play in stripes.
Ooh.
Now, there's two ways of looking at this. We either say, and be very strict, and say it can only be teams that are actually in stripes, but we can choose them from any country. Or we go for British clubs that play in either stripes or hoops.
Yeah, do the latter. The British ones.
British ones, but there can be hoops as well.
Hoops, here it is. Hoops. Sorry.
What?
They say that at QBR, don't they? Hoops. Yeah, I'm not going to sing it, but yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people will be hearing that for the second time because clearly I'm going to put that at the start of the show before we begin.
Well, I'll just give you one as a free starter, mate. Do you know what I mean? So,
well, I quite liked Up His Locker.
Up His Locker. It is Locker. Yeah. Cool. I think I'm going to be quite good this one.
Do you want to go first?
Yes, please.
Let's go.
Gotta listen out for this guy. It's a famous name, but don't flop. There's something like Sebastian Coe. Celebrity 2-word tango.
Sheffield Wednesday.
Sheffield United.
Coventry City.
Sunderland.
QPR.
Newcastle United.
Reading.
Yeovil Town.
Doncaster Rovers.
Southampton.
Do
you know what? As well, I'm actually very, very happy that you've forgotten one there or couldn't get one out because there was one there I had to question. Coventry City. I know this season they were in blue and white stripes, but traditionally, are they really?
You didn't say what season it was. There wasn't that.
Fair enough. All right. I'll give you.
I must say, Reading was a bit of one. I wasn't too. Yeah, the Reading definitely is stripes, isn't it?
It's hoops, but
hoops.
Yeah,
it's hoops, isn't it?
Yeah, I thought it was a good shout actually, and I was very close to losing that one. I managed to get Southampton out of the bag at the last moment.
Yeah, you done me on Newcastle. That was the one that I thought was the obvious one that you wouldn't think about, and you did, and that stumped me a little bit.
Sorry about that.
That's all right, mate. Not a problem. That's quite a good one. I like that.
That was a good one. David, if you've got any others, please pass them on.
What else did we miss, though? I'm trying to think. Did we miss any from the Premiership, potentially?
Probably. Well, we had Southampton and Sunderland. I guess Hull this season.
Yes.
Do.
Yeah, Hull. I can't think of too many others, though.
Not off to Stoke, yeah.
Oh, there's quite a few, isn't there?
When you start to actually think about it, we've missed absolutely hundreds. But
cool. Let's move over on.
Let's move on. Lots of things we said to talk about. Kingsmeadow for two reasons. Let's go with the first one. Milton Keynes. You know we have to talk about it. It's coming up very, very shortly. It'll be here before we know it. I'm dreading it. And looking forward to it in equal measure. It's very strange feelings I have about the game. Ticket information has been released. And obviously the club are being very, very sensible in their process of selling tickets, even in the home areas. And then the arrangements for the away fans are very stringent indeed, which I think is probably going to mean they're going to have very, very few fans that actually make the trip, which is interesting. But a few people have been unsure about ticket selling arrangements for the home areas. And Stu, you're, should I say it's fair to say, not too happy about it?
Well, yeah, Joe, I'm reasonably okay with it. In terms of social media has been manic all week, isn't it? We're now only, when we launched this podcast, we'll be 12 days? 12 days away. Yeah. So the build-up already has gone on about tickets rather than actually anything about the game itself. So let's wait for that to start. But there has been a few issues, isn't there? It seems to come along the way of the way the club been very, very strict. Personally, I'm pleased they're being strict because after the Charlton fiasco, let's be honest, where we allowed an ex-manager of Milton Keynes to cause havoc and put us in a bad light. We can't afford any errors on this game. We are responsible for the safety of their fans, their players, and equally our fans as well, to make sure we don't get any fruitcakes, as I call them, in amongst us. Because let's be honest, when we played Milton Keynes away in the first FA Cup game, there was many a fan that you and I both spotted that were just there for the trouble. And it was quite obvious. Yeah,
sorry to not disagree with you, but I would say more so the League Cup game, I think. That's where I noticed it more. I think the FA Cup game, where we sold out that allocation or whatever, we had 3,000 fans or whatever. I think we actually did ourselves very, very proud that day. I felt the League Cup game tended to have quite a number of faces. I was like, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I remember that. I still think the first game, I remember seeing a few that I'm thinking I don't recognise. I'm not saying that I recognise everybody's face in a 3,000 crowd, but you do tend to know your regulars and your people who just look like they fit, and the ones who wear the typical clobber that would be worn in such occasions. But I'm not really that disappointed that we've been very strict. There's only one thing that I think we have been too strict on when we go through the requirements is where if you're a Don's Trust member or PLC shareholder, you can buy a ticket as long as you're not a season holder, but also you've bought tickets for 5 games in the last 3 years. That is difficult because a lot of fans do buy on the gate. So we are technically not capturing those fans at paying the gate or any way of capturing those, which I think that's the only area have we been a bit too strict. But there's been a lot of commotion on social media about I'm a season holder, I want to buy an extra ticket. Personally, I don't think you should be able to because the club can't guarantee who that goes to. And ultimately, they can't guarantee that it's a Wimbledon fan. Yes, trust is a great thing, but trust doesn't really come across if there is trouble at the game and the FA go, what did you put in place to make sure you knew who was at the game?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think more when I mention about you not being happy about things, I think it's more some of the reaction from some of our fans who are a little bit toys out of pram on this. A point was made to us earlier, wasn't it, about problems with the Sutton game. Of course, we've had our say about the arrangements for the Sutton game and our opinions on that, and I still await news of a review of the situation of the ticketing in that game. All's well that ends well in terms of that game, but we talked about structures and having things in place, and we've now got things in place, and people that weren't happy before not having those structures are now unhappy that we do have these structures. That's sort of what I meant there, but yeah, we can't be too careful, as you say. It's sad for those people that do buy on the day or get tickets through season ticket holders that they know who get them an extra ticket or however it might work on a normal match day. So there's no actual printed record is there that they can prove that they've been to so many games in X number of years or whatever. So it's unfortunate, but I don't see any way around that, unfortunately. As you say, something probably will, to be honest with you. You can't stop. It's very, very difficult to stop any little thing happening. But should something bad happen, the FA are going to look at us and say, well, as you said there, how were you preparing for that eventuality, or what did you do to ensure that didn't happen? And the club can turn around and say, look, we did this. I've got a whole lorry load of things that were put in place to avoid things happening. If something slips through the net, it slips through the net. I don't think the club could have done more as it stands at this moment in time.
No, and we spoke to a few people, didn't we, on Saturday about the game, because obviously we're very curious on, as fans generally, we're a little bit disappointed to see what happened with the Charlton game and stuff like that. And we spoke to a few people on Saturday, and the club are doing more than enough. They've been, and some people, I saw one on social media that it feels like a knee-jerk reaction to this. The club have been preparing for this game probably since the day it was announced. I think this has been very much a thing that's been going on, and they've been looking at the best way of making sure we have safety. But we spoke to people on Saturday, and we could put everything in place, but the problem we have is we have a ground that you are within touching distance of a player, and that is a concern when you've got a certain player with ginger hair who's going to be taking a lot of throw-ins that day, and basically you've got to try and protect him amongst fans. So you've got to know who's in the ground, and even if you still do know who's in the ground, you've still got potential of it going wrong, and we fear that. And I hope we get to a situation where we can report on the game the Thursday after with a great win and no trouble, but it does concern me.
I think what we're all hoping for is to make the evening or the atmosphere as inhospitable as it can be without crossing that line.
Yes.
We want to make sure that anyone attending that game from the other side are made to feel as uncomfortable as possible without us doing anything that's going to put the club into any jeopardy or anything like that.
And how pleasing is it? When we are after the commentary game, you and I were chatting about, great, we've got them coming up in 4 weeks' time. How great is it? We've hit form.
Don't jinx it.
And potentially we're going to play the game being ahead of them as well. I couldn't want more in life. I just want to be ahead of them before we play them, and just to be informed, just because we haven't been informed sometime when we played them before, have we? Which has been a disappointment. Although you could argue when we went there in the league this year, we were okay, weren't we? But it would just be great to go there with a full team to pick from and just beat them and make it as horrible experience for them on the pitch for the evening.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. Kingsmeadow Stadium, as you mentioned, is very, very small. You are in touching distance of the players, but for Kingstonian fans, that's not going to be the case from next season. They've just announced that they are going to be sharing for a season with Leatherhead. Now, we had hoped to speak to a representative of Kingstonian. We didn't manage to arrange it for this week. We might try and do this in a future edition of the show to get their viewpoint, but in reality, you can see quotes all in the local press in and around Kingston. It's absolutely huge news. It is a shame for the fans and officials of Kingstonian that they're having to move quite a distance. Leatherhead, technically, obviously, clearly not in the borough, not even in London. So it's a bit of a departure. You do worry about what attendances are going to be like, especially for those midweek Mondays. They're going to have Monday night games continuing like they do at the moment at Kingsmeadow, but at Fetcham Grove and Leatherhead instead. I do understand, and it is rumoured, that as part of our financing or whatever we're doing in terms of our own stadium and the money we've got earmarked for that, we have set aside quite a substantial sum to pass on to Kingstonian to help them out. And we know, and we're certain of, how much is done for Kingstonian by our club behind the scenes. Doesn't necessarily get the press or the media spotlight or the attention. People probably don't even have a clue the amount of things that happen behind the scenes to help Kingstonian out. We have to be very, very careful, though, because this could reflect badly on us if this becomes a bigger issue. It's huge locally. It really is a big deal locally. And even people I know who, not particularly football fans, but they are aware of Kingstonian. I'd say not football fans, but they're aware of football. They're not going out week in, week out or anything like that. But Kingstonian is their local club, especially where I live. And there is a little bit of bad feeling about us in terms of the role we've played in what they view as Kingstonian being kicked out.
Yeah, and I get that because if you look at top level, it looks like, you know, the criticism is you're now doing what happened to you, or something like that, or you're now making a team homeless. But let's be honest, you know, when we bought the ground off the Coslers back then, Kingstonians had got into a really bad deal. They were getting no money from that. Let's not forget, we actually allowed them to play rent-free at Kingsmeadow. We also gave them a friendly. Back in the early days, we used to give them a friendly, and all the proceeds went to that. We look after the pitch. We even got some of our volunteers that go and do the pitch after Kingstonians games. There's a lot we do, but we don't go and shout about it, because actually it's what we feel as a community club, as a club that understands, you know, that they haven't got a big fan base. We've got into their area. We do understand that. But I just feel Kingstonian, it's interesting now, isn't it? That it's in the news, and it's now they've made a decision. But if it was their local club, why is it such a big deal now? They've had many, many, many years to do something. But I just feel, if I'm being totally honest with you, they've sat on their laurels because we've looked after them. And then once we've got our house in order, we've made the deal that we've done, it's now a case of crying wolf and going, you're kicking us out. Not to the fact that we actually have no duty to give them any money. We don't. That's not anything that's contractually written. We don't have to do that, but we're doing that because we think it's ethically right. But Kingstonians will set us on. You know, it will look bad no matter what we do, which is a shame, because we don't have to go and shout from the rooftops about what we've done to help them. But sometimes you wonder if we help them too much, which basically got them a bit too comfortable.
In fairness to the quotes and the people that have been out in the press from the Kingstonian side of things, that's not been mentioned as well so far. They've looked at the club as it is for reasons, and they're looking very much at what they can control in this situation. They've mentioned the fact that there was a vote actually last year, if you remember, with the suggestion that supporters took over the running of the club, with fears about the current, you know, setup and what it might entail in the future. And obviously, Leatherhead has been, for the majority, it's a big no-no. Okay, there are people who've already said, look, it's not for me. I'm not going to be travelling all the way over to Leatherhead for a home game, which is understandable. But they are looking at what they can do to improve the situation. There are talks about grounds being built in Chesington, new leisure facilities, including a new stadium. So that's very much up in the air as well at this moment in time. But they are looking at solutions potentially away from looking to necessarily blame other forces. And I think that's in credit to those Kingstonian fans that have spoken out. There's a lot that have yet to speak out in the press or media or anything like that, who not quite as pleasant towards us. But that's the situation it is. They'll be playing at Leatherhead from next season.
Just quickly, can I just quickly say what really Kingstonians need to do is the problem they had, and Kingstonian fans that I've spoken to, I don't know a lot of Kingstonian fans, but ones I've spoken to when I've gone to games and they've been around, or sometimes we've got to games early and they've been waiting for the coach to go to their games, is that the ground's just too big for them. Blatantly, the ground was built for them, and reasonably new ground, but we've made it bigger because we've had to make it a league ground. And there's even a stage where they don't open a lot of the ends now because, well, one, we took the Kingston Road end from them and made it into a John Green stand. There was a lot of resentment on that. But they realistically need to use that money, and also Kingston Council, to give them something like what Hampton and Richmond have got. A ground that suits their level. And that's not being condescending or disrespectful, but ultimately that seems to be the big thing that's gone against Kingstonians, is the fact that we've changed their ground and made it too big, and actually what they want is a homely ground but for their size. And hopefully, you know, depending on what money we're giving them and what help Kingston Council can give them, it may actually end up working well for them, but they're going to have to move out of borough first.
Another club in a little bit of danger right now, Leyton Orient. We wouldn't normally mention these sorts of things, but we do like to touch on the wider interests of football. And they've been hit with a winding up order, haven't they? An unpaid tax bill, on top of all their other problems. They are thinking, as a last resort at the moment in time, but it looks to be coming ever closer, of using our skills and expertise and setting up again, creating a Phoenix club. Very, very sad to see. We would not want that to happen to Leyton Orient, the second oldest club in London, would you believe?
Yeah, it's unreal, isn't it? And I obviously went last season to Leyton Orient. It's the first time I've been there. Last ground I hadn't been to. I've done all the London grounds that set up for Leyton Orient. I loved it. Typical old ground. Do you know what I mean? Not old, but do you know what I mean? In the heart of London, Stratford, that sort of area, and lovely ground. But the problem is they don't own it. That's the biggest problem, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Eddie Hearn, not Eddie Hearn. Yes, it is. No, it's not. What's his dad's name? Barry Hearn.
Barry Hearn, yeah.
God, yeah, he forgets his dad so quickly. But obviously, he sold it to the crazy Italian, but didn't sell the ground. So he's still underground, still pays rent off them. It's rumoured now that the Italian chairman doesn't attend games because he's put close to 10 million, reportedly 10 million pounds into the club, and sees no more point of putting that money in. I understand that. But they also apparently have £5 million in debt, and they're wondering now whether this 250,000 tax bill.
Yeah,
they're wondering now whether actually the Italians are going to look at it being worth paying, which is very concerning, isn't it? Because Leyton Orient are a traditional old London club, and it's sad. We've got some friends over in the Orient Outlook who do a podcast as well, and they've been covering it for all season, and it's just terrible there, isn't it? They went from League One, potentially going into Championship, being very close to get to Championship with Brentford at that time, to now dropping out of the Football League, which is disastrous.
It is. The Italian owner has hinted that he would sell, but not for anything less than the £4 million he bought the club for originally, which is just not going to happen at the moment, especially for a club that looks set to fall through into the National League, into the Conference, into non-league, all under the management currently of Danny Webb, which we forget, 33-year-old Danny Webb.
But how can you sell ground? How can you sell a club for £4 million that doesn't own the most important thing?
Well, this is it. That was Sam Hammam's greatest contract ever, was selling us to the Norwegians. And they sold them. What did we have that was worth whatever it was at the time, like 25 million or whatever it was?
All we had was players on the pitch, wouldn't we? We had sellable assets, which you could argue, yes, we had. I'm trying to think now. Do we have John Arsenal at that time? I can't remember there, but we probably had tangible assets in the club. But if you look at that Leyton Orient team, what does it add up to? Not much. It's probably I don't know. If you sold all the players now, you wouldn't get that much, would you?
No, they're struggling as well at the moment with their squad and a number of young players. So it is a real shame. But we wish them all the best. We wish them luck, the supporters there, that they can resolve something and come out of it better than the situation is at the moment. We shall watch that space. Poli on go?
Yes, definitely.
Alright, Poli on go this week. Stu is I don't want to say where it is because that might help you.
Oh, that'll do, yeah.
Let's just start with a fairly cryptic clue. First clue, Dom's travelled to this stadium and he's seen about 30,000 fans streaming in.
Streaming in. No, can't think of anything on that one.
Okay, well, as you know, Dom has gone to many grounds this season and seen many statues. This stadium has 2 statues of 2 very famous local ex-players who are now both deceased. Very local England internationals from many, many, many years ago. One of them might have had the surname Mannion. Or Hardwick.
Hardwick? I can only think of something like Hull or somewhere, but no. I can't think.
No, okay. Last one before we get to your favourite, the anagram clue. This ground is considered a very, very new ground. Actually, it's now it's over 20 years old. It's almost the same age as me.
20 years old. I'm going to make a stab at going for Bolton Wanderers.
Close in terms of the fact it's a new ground, but it's not actually near Bolton. It's closer to Bolton than it is to us. But I'll give you the final anagram clue.
Okay.
And I should say at this point, because I didn't mention it at the start, you've actually been on a bit of a roll in this game.
I know.
So we could be disappointing. Could be a flat end to a good run. Maybe your run on Poli on Go is inverse proportion to our form on the pitch. Maybe when we're rubbish, you're good, and when we're good, you can't get it.
And Poli scores his 30th for the season, and now I'm struggling in his namesake.
There you go. Well, anyway, the anagram is SIT Mad Elder Virus.
Shit. No, I haven't got a clue.
Okay. I'm afraid, Stu, we failed.
Cool. Put me out of misery.
Well, that's a little bit extreme. Able to get the clue on Podium Go. It is the Riverside Stadium, which is the home of...
Middlesbrough.
It is.
And the streaming is,
Because it's the Riverside, you see.
Damn.
See?
Is Middlesbrough close to Bolton? Well, it's closer than what it is. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. I was close because I think it's a newish stadium, probably built around the same... Well, no, maybe about 5 or so years afterwards. No, it wasn't. Actually, it was only been about 2 or 3 years after the Riverside was open that the Reebok Stadium, as it was at the time, was open, so...
Yeah, because I remember I didn't do... I'd done the Riverside, but I didn't do the Old Ground, which was Ayresome Park, I remember properly.
It was.
And I hadn't... Yeah, I think, if I remember properly, that was just as I started going to away games, so I didn't do that. And my most biggest disappointment was I didn't do Roker Park either before I went to Sunderland. Gutted. Roker Park was supposed to be in hell of a ground.
Do you know what my greatest disappointment was?
What?
Alton Towers. Rubbish. Of course. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Bolton Wanderers, though, because that is, of course, where we are playing on Saturday. Unfortunately, I cannot make it. Guess where I'm going on Saturday instead, Stu, to make up for my lack of football?
Pro Luton Town.
No, the other one.
The other?
Fulham. One. Yeah, Fulham. Going back to Fulham on Saturday.
Who they got?
Big game. Preston North End.
Well, it's a big game in terms they've got 3 names, but yeah.
Well, it's push for the playoffs for those two, right on the fringes of the playoffs. But anyway, I'm gutted because we don't get to revisit the spot of my brother Chris's greatest moment in supporting Wimbledon.
True. But you know what? The way Lee's going, I'm sure they're going to be in League 2 next season. So League 1 with us next season anyway.
Yeah, true. I think we probably will be. So we'll probably go there next year. But for those of you who don't know, yes, my brother, in trying to... What's the nice way of saying it? Let's just say he lost his footing exiting the stadium and was left with a lot of mud covering pretty much every part of his body, all the way home on the train in first class.
It was great.
It was great. He dropped his phone, my phone at the time, old Nokia 3210, if you remember those. They're not bringing those back, are they? It's the 3310 they're bringing back, but anyway.
Yes.
And he dropped the phone, and he fell on his backside, and then he stood back up, picked the phone up, and just carried on as normal, whilst everyone around was crying with laughter.
Ever a professional, wasn't he?
That's the first time anyone's ever said that about him.
Yeah, he was though. I think that's what made us laugh so much is that he tried to style it out, and probably would have if it wasn't a fact that about 50 to 100 people saw him deck it on his backside.
Absolutely, great days. Well, he's done well to keep his footing on the pitch at the moment in his role as Hayden's babysitter around the pitch. So if you are wondering, yes, that huge, hairy mammoth with silly teeth that can barely see and barely stand up, yes, that is my brother, helping Hayden around the pitch. Anyway, quick prediction for Bolton away?
Do you know what? I'm thinking we're going to pick up a point. I really do. They're struggling. In terms of they're struggling, they have games in hand and they haven't got maximum points on them. Like I say, Bristol Rovers took a point off them on Tuesday night, and they are 2 points behind Scunthorpe and Fleetwood with a game in hand. But it's getting squeaky bum time, and Bolton desperately need to get promoted, don't they? Because of their financial situation. And I just think going in there with the form we've got, I fancy us to nick a point.
I'll be very, very happy with the point on Saturday. Any other games that take your particular attention? I'm looking down the list. Scunthorpe Fleetwood stands out.
Yeah, Scunthorpe Fleetwood, massive, isn't it? They were talking about that. I watched I always watch the play of the opposing team to see what their manager was saying and stuff like that, and he did hint towards that. And also, just to say, Graham Alexander did fully accept that Wimbledon deserved their win on Tuesday night, so fair play to him. Yeah, some interesting games, isn't there? I'm looking at Bury Gillingham down at bottom of the league. That'd be interesting. Franchise go to Millwall. Hopefully they get done there. Northampton, Charlton. There's some good games down the bottom of the league that I suppose I shouldn't really be still looking at, but you just can't help in a way, can you really? But obviously,
keep an eye out on them. Swindon, Chesterfield, Swindon.
Yeah, Shrewsbury, Coventry. That's a localish sort of derby, isn't that way? Sort of Midlands, West Midlands derby. Walsall Oldham. There's loads actually. There's loads down the bottom, isn't there?
There is loads down the bottom, but enough of your personal problems. We need to move on. We actually need to kind of bring an end to this week's show, I'm afraid, Stu. We've run out of time.
Damn.
I know.
Okay.
Flies by, doesn't it?
It does.
It does. We are, of course, listening to These Fine Gentlemen. Check them out at These F Gentlemen on Twitter with their track Sorry. Thank you very much, guys, for that. Please, please, please do check these guys out on Twitter. Really, there's nothing to add. That's pretty much it. Updates from Bolton will be available on all our usual places, won't they? At 9YRS Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. Check out our Facebook page for lots and lots of conversations going on there. So thank you very much to everyone that joins in on Facebook at the moment. Increasing all the time. And check out the website as well, 9yrspodcast.org. My ridiculous job, Stu, means I didn't get your article up on the weekend, but I will attempt to do so this weekend.
No problem.
I promise you all. I'll promise I'll get it done this weekend. Busy times for yourself as well, I believe.
Yeah, it's getting in now to coming up to a 3-month countdown for my wedding, so we're getting everything done now, and any spare time I have isn't really spare time anymore, it's going on to the wedding, so yes, looking forward to it. It'd be nice just to get married and get a holiday. Now,
not that we ever waffle or make things up on the show, but just thinking as we're coming to the end, what else can we talk about? Should we give ourselves a bit of a shout out? Like Twitter. So, for instance, if you are on Twitter and you fancy following any of the podcast team, of course you can do so. Stu, your Twitter handle is?
Stuart D. Deakins. Yes, I think that's what it is. Yeah.
Yes.
D. Deakins.
Stuart D. Deakins. I am, of course, I say of course, you won't know this if you don't follow me, at AFCWNick14, the best Twitter handle ever in history. Don't forget the rest of the podcast team, though. George Jones, at ballboy_Don. Of course, my brother Chris, which is cdrape01. He might beat me for best Twitter handle ever. Paul Raymond, at Paul N. Ray. And then finally, that little tingle you hear in the background is probably the magic of Mark Hendricks. Mark at CIFF. So why not give us all a follow? And on that note, I'm going to bring the end to the show now because we've waffled for far too long. Please join us next week. Stu, next week we're going to be joined, can you believe it, by Faye Dunaway.
Oh, I like her.
Oh no, sorry, no, I've opened the wrong thing. No, it's actually Warren Beatty. Actually, Warren Beatty, we're going to be seeing you next week on the show.
Disastrous.
Sorry about that. We'll see you then.
Don't mean you gotta take it out on. I'm sorry that your day didn't go your way. Don't mean you gotta take it out on me.
No, you smile because you don't like Jill because she's younger than you.
No, she's not. She's 50.
Well, so's Helen Mirren.
So's Benjamin Netanyahu.
You're always going on about Benjamin Netanyahu. Let it go, Lynn. You're never going to meet him.